Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of the Recovery Weekly Check-In. I'm John Falchicchio, Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, and on behalf of Mayor Bowser, thanks for joining us today. We have had a very busy week, although it's only Tuesday. Yesterday, the mayor announced that the District of Columbia is going to pivot to walk-up vaccination centers. So there will be 11 vaccination centers around the District of Columbia, and they will serve residents on a walk-up basis, so no appointment necessary, no portal to navigate. We will have those 11 sites with the days and hours of operation listed at vaccinate.dc.gov. We're also going to highlight for you vaccinefinder.org. Vaccinefinder.org is actually run by the federal government, but that shows you an array of resources to get you and your family vaccinated. So please do take a look at those two websites and think about making your plan to get vaccinated. So throughout the pandemic, we've talked about a lot of new words and phrases that probably weren't top of mind before it. PPE is one example, personal protective equipment, and PPP, Paycheck Protection Program. Today we're going to talk about that category in the ladder, that assistance for businesses that has flowed from the federal government. So we're excited to get the conversation started today to talk about some of the programs that have been with us throughout the pandemic, and then two new programs that we're really highlighting today whose applications are just about to open. And so with that, I want to bring in our first guest, who's no stranger to the check-in, and that's Director Christy Whitfield, who runs the Department of Small Local Business Development, who's been helping district businesses and associations navigate the array of federal programs that can benefit them. So with that, I'll turn it over to Christy.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. DSLBD, the Department of Small and Local Business Development, is here to help our business community survive, prosper, and grow. We know we are on the horizon of recovery, and we are excited as we continue to see businesses starting to move more closer to reopening and welcoming customers back into stores. And DSLBD has been here to help businesses pivot and prepare, and one of our most important resources has been accessing our federal resources. Now, DSLBD is honored on behalf of Mayor Bowser to run our Main Street programs. We have over 24 Main Street programs across the city, and our Main Streets are our boots on the ground to help make sure that we are able to provide local and very direct training and technical assistance to our business communities. But where we've really been busy lately, and we're going to move quickly into talking to our friend from the SBA, are these federal resources, because while this mayor has amassed over $150 million of grant funds to help our small businesses during this pandemic, the federal resources are our best resource that we want to make sure that people are not missing out on these opportunities. So I will turn it over quickly to Rod Johnson, who is our expert, who can tell you all the tricks and tips about the very many resources that we have from the SBA. And then I will just say that while there are resources at SBA.gov, DSLBD is your warm voice at the end of the line, DSLBD.dc.gov. If you want help with some of these resources, we want to make sure that you access them, that you are making sure that you're getting your fair shot and your piece of that opportunity. So with that, I think it is my job to introduce Rod, who has been a lifesaver for many of our businesses, the Lender Relationship and Small Business Development Center Officer. That's the title these days?
Yes.
All right, welcome, Rod, and thank you again for coming back with us this Tuesday afternoon.
All right, well, thank you very much, Christy. I want to jump right into the presentation because we really want to hear from the restaurant owners. And so I'm going to begin actually with the new Paycheck Protection Program. All right, so if you can pull that slide up, that would be great. All right, so as we know, the Paycheck Protection Program is actually to assist you 60% for payroll, 40% for business expenses. Unlike the first draw of the PPP that went up to $10 million, now the second draw only goes up to $2 million for employers with 300 or less employees. If it winds up turning into a loan, The interest rate on the loan is 1%. You have a 2 to 5 year repayment period, and there are no collateral or personal guarantees for the PPP loan. That is wonderful, and frankly, that is unheard of for a commercial loan. And yes, with the proper documentation, the loan can be 100% forgiven. I want to quickly give you the process. Once you're about to go for forgiveness and you turn it in to your bank, then the bank has 60 days to review the application and then turn it over to the SBA, who has 90 days to actually render an answer on if the loan has been fully forgiven or if the loan has been partially forgiven. So that's the new Paycheck Protection Program. If we can turn to the next slide and go over the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. If you recall, actually a little over a year ago, the EIDL loan, as we call it, was actually the first program that was approved to help businesses sustain themselves through this pandemic. All right, and so the purpose is still to fund payroll and to meet business obligations. However, unlike PPP, where you have to use 60% for payroll and 40% for operating expenses, with the disaster loan, you don't have that restriction. The loan amount has been raised from $150,000 to $500,000, okay? Now, the terms, 3.75% for profit companies, 2.75% for nonprofit organizations. It's a 30-year payback, and there is no prepayment penalty or fees. How do you use the money? The same way that you can for PPP in terms of expenses for working capital, gas, water, electric, rent, okay, interest on a commercial mortgage, collateral requirements. The SBA will take a UCC1 on all the business assets of the company if the loan amount is over $25,000, all right? There are no forgiveness features for the EIDL loan. Now, let's go to the Restaurant Rescue Fund. That's what everybody wants to hear about. Actually, we're thinking that the portal for applications will actually open on Monday. I think Monday is what, May 3rd? So on May 3rd, the portal should open for applications for the RRF, as we call it. Congress has appropriated $28.6 billion for this program. Now, this is Rod's editorial. I think that the money will go pretty fast, so I hope that you all have the documentation ready so that when you apply, you can zip right through the application process. Okay, so that's very important. In fact, I'm going to give you the address. It is restaurants.sba.gov, restaurants.sba.gov, okay, so that you can actually apply. Now, next slide, please. So who is actually eligible? All right, so we have restaurants, food trucks, food banks, food carts, caterers, bars, snack and alcoholic beverage places, inns, wineries, distilleries, anything that has to do with food and drink, pretty much you are eligible for the RRF, okay? Now, next slide, please. Now, you may get up to $5 million per location, not to exceed $10 million. That's a lot of money, all right, for the applicant and any affiliated business. Now, keep this in mind. Unlike PPP, where you could get a small amount of money, with this fund, the minimum award is $1,000, okay? So $1,000 is the minimum. If it's under that, you won't see any funds. Next slide, please. All right, so here's the good part. Unlike the Shuttered Venue Opportunity Grant, where you actually have to register in the SAM system, with this fund, you don't have to register in SAM, and the SBA, this is another good thing, will not require a DUNS or cage identifier, which is fantastic, all right? And a valid unexpired I-10 are actually acceptable. Now, if you have any questions regarding the I-10, just go to the I-10 expiration frequently asked questions, all right, at irs.gov. Next slide, please. All right, so who is ineligible? Well, we know the publicly traded companies are not supposed to get funds from this program. If the restaurant has been permanently closed, is a nonprofit organization, and you won't be eligible or qualify for funding of at least $1,000, and you can't be a state or local government operated business. All right? So next slide, please. All right, who is eligible according to the way that your business is formed? Of course, C corporations, S corporations, single member LLCs, sole proprietors, self-employed individuals, 1099 contractors, tribal businesses, and of course, LLCs taxed as an S or a C corp. Now, if you happen to be a B corporation, then you must tell us if you're taxed as an S or a C corp, okay? And if you need help with that, just refer to your accountant to help you with that. All right, next slide, please. All right, who's eligible? Franchises are eligible, all right? Any business concern operating as a franchise and meeting all of the program requirements are eligible. The franchise, of course, and I think most of you know about the SBA franchise directory, the franchise must be located on the SBA's franchise directory. In the application portal, applicants will be able to look up, if you don't know if your franchise is on the directory, then you'll be able to look up the entity on the SBA's franchise directory. Now, if your franchise has been declined previously by the SBA, or your franchise and you don't see your franchise on the directory, then there is a email that you can send to actually have the SBA look at your application and see if we can get you on the franchise list. All right, next slide, please. I'm glad that actually franchises are eligible. All right, bankruptcy. Now, as we all know, bankruptcies usually shut down the lending process, right? Chapter 13, Chapter 11, Chapter 7, Chapter 9, that's not listed on here. All right, but those usually shut down the lending program. However, if you have, or in the midst of a Chapter 11 or Chapter 13, okay, as long as your plan is approved, then actually you will be eligible to receive RRF funds. I think that is fantastic, okay? Now, however, if you don't have an approved plan for any of those bankruptcies, the Chapter 7, 11, 13, 12, then you are not eligible for these funds. So let's make sure that you have your paperwork together to show that you actually have an approved bankruptcy plan. All right? Next slide, please. All right. How do the other SBA relief programs impact this? All right, so if you have a PPP already, then the PPP loan that you have will actually be subtracted out of the RRF funds, okay? Let me repeat that. If you have a current PPP, that loan amount will actually be subtracted from the RRF funds, all right? Also, you can't have an SVOG, right? Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, so keep that in mind. So, you have to decide which program you want to use. Do you think it's more advantageous for you to use the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, or is it better for you to use the PPP? All right, you have to use that, make that determination for yourself. But what I will say is this, remember, May 31st is the last day that you can apply for the PPP program, okay? And there's under $50 billion left in the PPP program, so if you haven't applied, you better hurry up to your bank and put in that application. All right, next slide, please. All right, what are the eligible uses? All right, so construction of outdoor seating. Now, expansion costs are ineligible, because I've been getting that question over the last 2 or 3 days. Expansion costs are ineligible, okay? Now, of course, you can pay any business mortgage, and unlike PPP or EIDL, you can actually pay the principal and interest using these funds, okay? And then business debt service, both principal and interest on existing loans. And for the sake of time, for the business expenses, just think of the expenses that you would normally pay. If you got PPP, then you know what those expenses are: gas, water, electric, phone, landline, cell phone, transportation costs, PPE, and all sorts of other expenses can be used with the revitalization fund. All right, next slide, please. So we should be coming up toward the end. When do you have to use the funds? Plain and simple, by March 11th, 2023. All right, now, along the way, the SBA may ask you to verify and document how you've used those funds, okay? So along the way, you may receive an email from the SBA, and they want to see the documentation that you are using these funds properly, okay? All right, next slide, please. How do I get help? 1-844-279-8898. Now, it says call your local district office, which is actually my office, which actually turns out to be me. No, you do not call me. You call your local Small Business Development Center at Howard University. You get in touch with the SCORE representative. Okay, you get in touch with your chambers of commerce. All of those organizations can help you along with the Women Business Centers and the Veterans Business Opportunity Centers. That's where you can get your assistance. The SBA has funded those groups specifically to assist you with this program, okay? All right, next slide, please, and we should probably be toward the end, and that is it. So if you have any questions, go ahead and email me, don't call me, email me at roderick.johnson@sba.gov. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Rod, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. I had a few, but first and foremost, this is now, I think, your 5th appearance on the check-in, but this is the first time you're here in person.
Yes.
Can you tell us why that is?
Because I have received both vaccinations.
Fantastic.
Yes.
So it's a good reminder. It's a good reminder to everyone that as you get vaccinated, there's more activities that you can do. You might even be able to join us here in the weekly check-in.
That's right. All right.
I don't know if that's a reward or a punishment. But anyway, let's, Christy, I know there's going to be some questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Sean and Gavin present. But then if you do have questions, use the hashtag DCHope on Twitter or Facebook. Just put it in the chat or post it on social media using the hashtag DC Hope, and that'll allow us to see your question. We've already have some questions that have come in on social media. But before we go to those questions, we want to bring in Sean Townsend, who's also a regular on the check-in, to talk a little bit about his work in the Office of Nightlife and Culture and making sure restaurants and other businesses are ready to take advantage of these federal programs. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sean.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Always a pleasure to be here with you all on a Tuesday. I will be brief so that we can get back to questions of relief. Just wanted to run through and make sure that people are aware that the mayor made an announcement yesterday regarding modifications that will take place beginning on May 1st, with the first being non-essential businesses. Indoor capacity will raise from 25% to 50% or 250 people, whichever is lower. Also, restaurants and bars, there are a number of modifications that will be made on May 1, including that the number of people who can sit at a table, one table, is increased from 6 people to 10 people. Live music will be allowed outdoors, and there will also be some forms of entertainment that will be allowed indoors as well. In terms of entertainment, multi-purpose facilities, concert venues, and theaters may reopen at 25% capacity, and that's up to 500 people. Movie theaters can also take advantage of the capacity percentage as well. Ceremonies and meetings, weddings and special events, it's a 25% capacity indoors and outdoors. ABRA will be having an information session on all of the modifications beginning on May 1. On April 30th, this Friday at 10 a.m. If you would like more information about that, please visit abra.dc.gov. They will have information there where you are able to RSVP for this information session. Once again, that's this Friday, April 30th at 10 a.m. ABRA will host a information session regarding the modifications that will begin on May 1st. Additionally, just wanted to reiterate that residents that want a vaccine can get a vaccine beginning on May 1st. These are some of the sites that, the vaccination sites that are available for walk-up appointments beginning on Saturday. And also to go with that, Mayor Bowser has been calling for a day of action on Saturday, May 1st. So in light of that, she is hosting a day of action where we are asking all neighbors, all residents to canvass their neighborhoods and communities to encourage residents to get vaccinated. And you can do so by going to vaccinate.dc.gov and registering your neighbors or your residents in your communities. We're just making a push to get everyone vaccinated. Additionally, on May 10th, the Committee on Business and Economic Development will be hosting a public hearing regarding the reopened Washington, D.C. Alcohol Act. And this primarily is an act with loaded material that provides relief to the hospitality, to the restaurant industry. Specifically, we've heard of a lot of good feedback regarding streeteries, and this is the opportunity for residents and business owners to provide feedback to council regarding the positive impact that streeteries has had on the restaurant industry. So I want to highly encourage you all, whether you are a worker, a resident, or a business owner that has enjoyed streeteries and would like for streeteries to stay around through 2023, to please submit testimony via phone or email to the DC Council, and that's Business Economic Development at dccouncil.us or 202-724-8078. And last but not least, the DC Health Link is hosting a small business summit. This is their 7th annual summit on May 4th at 10 a.m. For more information on this, please visit dchealthlink.com. It's in the middle of National Small Business Week, and they are focused on providing tips and tools to grow your business during this challenging time. And with that being said, I'd like to introduce someone who has been very consistent in keeping the line of communication open with myself throughout the pandemic. But also Gavin Coleman of the Dubliner and Salt Line, also infamously known as the Dub, is on the brinks of opening a new business, but also has been able to pivot and take advantage of both local dollars and federal grant dollars as well. So I thought it was important to have Gavin come in to talk about some of the challenges that he's experienced, his businesses has experienced during COVID, how you've managed to take advantage of both local grant relief funds as well as federal, but then also tell us how you were able to manage opening a new restaurant in the middle of a pandemic as well. So with that being said, Gavin, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me here today. So yeah, like Sean said, I'll give you a little background. I am a DC resident and small business owner. My family has owned the Dubliner Restaurant and Pub on Capitol Hill for almost 5 decades now. My dad opened it up in 1974. I opened up the Salt Line in the Navy Yard in 2017, and I am getting ready, although I sometimes question why, to open up a restaurant next week in the downtown area. I'm in a unique position as a restaurant owner because I operate 3 very different places. I have a family business that's been around almost 5 decades in the Central Business District. The Salt Line is a newer restaurant, more destination in a more residential area. And then I am opening up a new restaurant downtown. So 3 very different experiences, 3 very different drops in revenue throughout the very, very tough year that we were coming out of. And then on top of that, there is not a federal local relief program that I have not benefited from to date. I have received multiple PPPs. I've applied for forgiveness for one of them and received that. I have applied and received a loan through the Fed, a Main Street loan. I have very graciously received a bridge fund loan from the district, which really got me through the 2 PPPs between 1 and 2 and some of the delays that were involved with that. And now I am getting all of my documentation ready to get ready for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which I hope really carries us through the rest of this uncertainty that COVID has brought us in the restaurant industry and gets us to the other side. I will say, and I know there's going to be a Q&A here with John about some of the experiences over the last year. There's been a couple things that have stood out as things that have really benefited me in getting all of these loans and grants. One has been documentation, getting ready, knowing that there's a deadline coming, starting working as soon as you find out what those requirements are, and getting your ducks in a row. It really helps you not only with the loan that you're applying for now, but the next one down the road, because a lot of them call for the same documentation. And then secondly, the relationship I have with a local bank. I made a decision a long time ago to use a small local bank here in DC, the National Capital Bank of Washington. They only have a couple branches, but they are very local, and they have been instrumental in me being at the front of the line to receive loans, because I have somebody to call and ask questions to. They come in as a smaller class of bank that windows open up earlier to, and I just think that's been a great asset to me and my partners and businesses. So with that, John, if you have any questions about the last year or anything.
We definitely want to talk through that. We're going to also ask that if those who are watching want to ask a question, they could do it also by calling our hotline right now that we have open. It's 1-844-881-1314. So if you dial 1-844-881-1314, all you have to do is press 0, and that'll get you in the queue to ask some questions. So we do have some questions on social coming out of the gate. But Rod, the one thing I was wondering about the restaurant fund is, so how do folks know how much they might be able to get out of the fund? What's sort of the way to think about that calculation?
All right, so there are 3 calculations. I'll just give you the easiest one because the other 2 are pretty complicated. And that would be the 2019 gross revenue minus your 2020 gross revenue minus any PPP money, and that will get you to what your loan amount will actually be. So you're going to need your 2019 tax returns, hopefully your 2020 tax returns, okay? And then you know what your PPP loan amount is. So it's really just subtracting the 2020 from the 2019 and your PPP to come up with the loan amount.
Got it.
It's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Christy, I don't know. Did you have something on that?
Well, I just wanted to say that this is a really important primer for the different resources that are out there. But Rod is going to be back with DSLBD on May 7th for a very long and in-depth session on how to apply for these funds and be able to answer a lot of other questions. And so we want to really encourage people to go to our website, and I think they're flashing it up on the website right now. But if you go to DSLBD.gov, you can click the link and go to the Eventbrite and sign up for a session where you're going to see the information that you've seen here, but then also a lot of the subsequent little. Rod's got a lot of, having sat in on several of Rod's longer sessions, he has a lot of little tips and tricks about how to get your application together. And so I want to really strongly encourage people to block off Friday, May 7th at 10 a.m. Friday, May 7th, 10 a.m., block your calendar. It'll be, the best chunk of time you've ever invested if you want to make sure you get this hands-on help from Rod.
Great. And Rod, the other question I know that I've heard is for venues that don't primarily sell food but sell drinks. So think of sort of like a nightclub. Which program should they look to try to participate?
That one you're going to have to do the math, okay? So for example, with PPP, and let's just say that you have an LLC formation.
Okay.
All right? And let's say you're even a single member LLC. So you'll take the gross income, line 7 on your Schedule C, divide that number by 12 times 2.5. Okay, that's for a normal business. For hotels and restaurants, you'll use the same formula. The gross income divided by 12 times 3.5, okay, which actually means either 2.5 times of working capital, right, or 3.5 times of roughly working capital. Okay, that would be the formula. So you look at that first. Then you look at the RRF. You take the 2019, you subtract your 2020 gross receipts minus your PPP, and whichever gives you the largest amount, that's the one that you go with.
Okay. And
Yeah.
those businesses would be eligible even if they serve more primarily drink as opposed to food?
You should be able to still qualify, yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll direct those folks too to the May 7th session.
Yes.
Just to make sure that they have the opportunity to ask you those questions and really get into the technical features of it.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that IDLE is open and will remain open.
Yes, so IDLE is open until December 31st. Now, one of the things I want to do, which I failed to mention, is if you want an IDLE increase, instead of waiting for the SBA to contact you, you email COVID IDLE increase request. That's a mouthful. COVID IDLE increase request at SBA.gov. In the subject line, you're going to put your 10-digit number along with increase, okay? And then in the body of the email, what you're going to do is put your company's name, address, telephone number, the owners, okay? And then they'll be able to quickly pull it up for you. And then they're going to send you an email letting you know the documentation that you need so that they can look at it to determine how much more money you'll be able to receive.
Okay. Gavin, so this all sounds very technical. So how do you as an operator figure out which opportunities are the best for you to apply for, and how have you sort of navigated that throughout the pandemic?
Well, I think having been in this from the beginning of the pandemic, it's really been chronological for me. I've taken it as they become available, knowing that I would need every dollar I could get to still be around at the end of it, right? So for me, it was easy enough to go through the PPP loan process the first time, and then learning from that the second time became a little easier. The city grants have been sometimes more specific for certain needs that we had, so they were easy enough to apply for and get. I think there's no harm in trying to get a grant or a loan, right? Everything is pretty straightforward, and so I went for anything that was available to me, and again, just used the resources that I had from the previous loans to make the next ones a little easier.
Absolutely. And I think in your opening remarks, you mentioned Bridge Fund as a loan. But
A
we'll
grant.
just consider that one as a grant.
Yeah, grant,
If
sorry.
that's okay with you.
But it gets confusing. There's a lot of terminology. It gets confusing because the PPP loan is a loan that becomes a grant,
Yes.
or forgivable, excuse me.
Yep.
And so the terminology between all of them are tough, but they keep the lights on and they keep people on payroll and,
Well, and the important thing too is about documentation, because even for our grant, we want to make sure that it is used by used within the allowable uses, right? So I think I don't want to make it sound so simple for folks that they don't realize that documentation is going to be important, whether on the application part of it or the forgiveness part of it, or just sort of their own accounting. I see Rod shaking his head at that.
Well, and I have, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So you've applied for forgiveness for one of the
Correct.
PPPs. Do you intend to apply for forgiveness for the other one?
I do. I think that looking back, I might have rushed to apply for forgiveness for one of my restaurants on the first draw, just because the guidance wasn't totally clear on to get more complicated on the ERTCs, the employee retention tax credits, and anytime you can get something off the books,
Right.
it's nice to get it off the books. So we had brought so many people back to work, it was easy enough to get the first one forgiven purely on payroll.
Right.
And looking back, I probably would have applied some different expenses to that and waited for more IRS guidance it's not the end of the world, but, so I didn't apply for the other restaurant yet, but now I'm getting ready to since the guidance is a lot clearer.
Well, and I think a lot of businesses had that same confusion, and maybe, Rod, you could speak to that contemplation, right, in terms of between a first and a second one, when to ask for forgiveness, if to ask for forgiveness. Ask for forgiveness for all of it, everyone.
Well, I think it just depends. So, for example, as we know, to get the second draw, you must have used all the draw one money, right, for PPP. All right. Now, some banks actually wanted you to get forgiveness first before they would give you the second draw. All right. But that really wasn't in the legislation. But some banks did require you to do that. All right. So you didn't have to do that. So now you use up all the money. And some people had a hard time using up all the PPP money. So I said, well, okay, use the remainder of the funds as a bonus to your employees, okay, and call it hazard pay. That way you use up all the funds, and then you can go to the second draw, okay? Well, now we're only 40 days out from when the plant, from when the things closes down. And so it may be hard now to get that first draw, use up all the money, and then go for the second draw. So I think timing now, we're toward the tail end of this thing, so I think it would be hard to get the first draw. The other thing is, most of the banks, unfortunately, have closed down their portals, okay? Because they are so inundated with applications, they're overwhelmed. Now, there are a couple of banks, and I'm not supposed to be, advertising for a couple of banks, but I will mention a couple of banks. One is National Capital Bank, of course, and then City First Bank. They're still processing, okay, PPP. And then you have the fintechs that are out there that are also continuing to process PPP loans, okay? So if you go to some of your other banks, particularly the larger ones, they've already closed the portal down.
Yep.
So go to your fintechs and National Capital Bank or City First, and you can, get through the process. Yep. Now, one of the things that, we were talking in the back, Gavin, are there what I would call some best practices that you could give to help people through the process? Because, you and I joked and talked about, normally we talk about the 5 C's of credit, and then I said, well, there should be a D called documentation.
Yeah.
And so can you talk to that a little bit? Because I think it's very important that some of the other business owners pick up on that.
Yeah, I mean, instead of just saying, get your documentation in order, like, how do you do that? I think that a good use of this money, if you're having a hard time spending it, right, which I did not have a hard time spending, and I can help anybody spend their money in a restaurant the right way if you want to know how, is hiring professionals to help you to do that. So to have a big payroll processor, for example, was a huge help to help you with all of the labor data. Having professional service with a good bookkeeper and a good CPA was a huge asset in helping me get everything together and being ready for both the application of the grants or loans, and then also the one time for the forgiveness. So having resources, because we're all still running our businesses, right? I'm still open. I'm still figuring out how to hire people back, to run a shift, and to convince customers to come back and feel safe in the restaurant. I don't have all the time in the world to get all of my documentation in place. And so having a team of people that you can lean on, I think is a great use of funds that you can get and getting your ducks in a row.
And we actually did have, and I got to check to see if that was an allowable use of our resilience grants, because we actually did a round called resilience grants, and what they were aimed at were to help businesses kind of upgrade some kind of function of their business. So maybe they had touchless payment system, or to really upgrade their website. That was one of the ways. But I think that kind of professional services, like, now is the time to do it. When you have like the funds to do it now. Because what you don't want to do is to get this wrong when you're doing, especially a loan that is forgivable, to account for that wrong. And so I think that, that advice to get professional help on that is really important. Christy?
Well, yeah, and I think it was, Deputy Mayor, one of those allowable uses because I think we do know that people have this struggle. And when you are running your business, you don't always think you can afford to pay that money to do that. But then I think that the race for these funds, and like we know that the Shuttered Venues grant is going to be a first come, first serve, which means that people that are ready will be in line. And so that if you are a business that has the access to those resources, or if your resources are ready, which means if you can afford to have a bookkeeper, you'll be ahead of somebody that maybe can't afford to have a bookkeeper and be ready. And so we have to be thoughtful about the way that we're providing the services that we provide. And I want to make sure that the businesses that are listening understand that we understand that it doesn't always feel feasible, which is why we are trying to be extremely thoughtful about the types of support we're putting together. So a tip, like what Rod is saying, what the Deputy Mayor is saying, in these moments where we're saying, how do we spend this money, putting those resources towards recovery might be the thing that puts that business at the front of the line the next time. Because I think we have these rare moments where we can kind of get our businesses ahead, and we want to make sure that we're helping to prepare to get them ahead. And if you're not ahead, you're not alone. And, call Paycheck and call DSLBD, and we will try to connect you to resources. Most businesses do not have a perfect filing cabinet with all of their tax returns and their balance sheets and all of their payroll in a perfect place. Most businesses do not. And we know this, and so don't think you have to pretend that you have that. We're going to just help get you there. So let's just get there together.
Great. And Sean, we're talking a lot about restaurants, but you've talked to a lot of the operators in the, maybe in the shuttered venue category. How are they getting prepared, and how are they, what programs are they taking advantage of?
I think one of the concerns or questions that a few operators had about the shutter venues is the ticket sale requirement. Apparently there's a requirement to show a specific number of ticket sales, at least a percentage, back in 2019. And I think that some of the larger venues, or smaller venues, don't necessarily meet the requirement of the ticket sales. Is anyone aware of ticket sales requirements? And I've heard that just today, someone asked me about ticket sales.
I actually have not heard that. So now I'm going to have to go back and take a look at the program, but I have not heard that.
Yeah.
All right.
In fact, I hear people pivoting towards the restaurant fund because they aren't eligible for shuttered venues. So one of my questions to you was going to be, I know that there was guidance released last week about if you are not one of the listed venues or listed categories that are eligible for restaurant fund, you just need to be able to show that you sell 33% of alcohol and or food. Is that accurate?
That's for ends, yes.
Okay.
For ends.
Okay. So then some of those venues will probably be eligible for the restaurant fund that don't necessarily sell food.
Is that food and beverage, or is that food or beverage?
It's food and beverage.
Food and beverage.
So I think that's
and
more
beverage.
Inns. You mean like the hotel?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess what we're really trying to figure out is for those nightlife operators,
Right.
folks who own like nightclubs, where do they go? Because they've been closed the longest and impacted the longest. So I think this is your 5th appearance. This might be the first time we've stumped you. So we can also
That's okay,
invite.
because when I come back,
Yep.
I'm going to have an answer for that.
Well, I was going to say also, we have another opportunity with the DSLBD. So maybe what we'll do is really get this information together for that session on the 7th. And maybe that's a good place to get the operators. And shuttered venues has not yet opened. Is that right?
It's opened.
It's
It
opened.
opened
yesterday.
on Saturday.
It
Oh, as of
opened
yesterday.
At
Okay.
12 noon.
Oh,
All right, so remember there's a priority, okay? So if you had a 90% drop in revenue, they get first priority,
Okay.
okay? So that's actually this week. Then there's those that had a 70% decrease in their gross receipts. Second week, third week, 25% drop, okay, in receipts. So what they're doing is actually prioritizing from the worst back down to those who weren't hurt as much. All right, is how they're actually prioritizing it. Now, let's remember that just like PPP, they're the same type of expenses that apply for the SVOG. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Except for you can also use the money for state and local taxes and setting up, the screens and different things that are indigenous to that industry.
Okay.
But primarily, if you follow the PPP guidelines for expenses, you'll be okay.
Expenses and allowable uses?
Yeah.
Okay.
Allowable uses.
Got it. All right. Well, maybe since that is already open, maybe what we'll do is kind of get you guys connected, make sure that we get that word out to the industry as well.
And here's the website, SVO grant at SBA.gov.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's go to the phone lines. We've got Sheila, who's been waiting patiently to join the conversation. Sheila, the line should be open. Can you hear us?
Hello?
Yes, Sheila, we can hear you.
Yes, may I ask? Okay. My question is, in regard to PPP, I have a small local business, minority-owned business, and I don't have a lot of employees, like I have only 2 or 3. And so the PPP loan appears to be gauged toward larger businesses, which then does not give us a lot of latitude because basically we already, small local businesses have difficulty with access to capital. So this PPP comes in, unless you have a lot of employees, then it really is not that beneficial to us small businesses.
What I would say is any funds
Is there some type of alternative to be able to really assist the small local minority businesses that have like 2 or 3 employees? Most small businesses I know.
All right, Sheila, we're going to have Rod jump in from SBA.
I think any funds that you can receive from PPP, regardless of size, is a help for you to sustain your business. Now, you not only have PPP, then you have the EIDL grant. If your company is located in a low to moderate income area, okay, go to SBA.gov/EIDL, put in your zip code, and it will tell you whether or not you're in a low to moderate income area. With that, then you can get a targeted EIDL grant for $10,000, okay, just for being located in a low to moderate income area. So now you have PPP. You have the EIDL grant. Then, now we have the EIDL loan that goes up to $500,000. So depending on what your 2019 and 2020 tax returns show and your year-to-date first quarter, March 31st, 2021 income statement shows, then you can get money for your business from the EIDL loan. So now you have 3 paths to get more money to sustain your business through the pandemic. So just don't rely on one federal government program. Use all the programs that are available to you so that you can sustain your business during the pandemic.
Great. And the EIDL grant, so that's, and is that capped on your revenue, or how is that? It's $10,000?
It's just across the board. It doesn't matter how big or small your business is. It's just $10,000.
Wow.
That's it.
Okay. We should, I'm looking at Christie for a little project. We might have to map where those areas are in the district.
Yeah, did that change though, Rod? Because at one point I thought it was $10,000 and then I thought it was $1,000 per employee.
The $1,000 per employee was the old formula.
Oh.
That's
okay.
old.
All right,
Now,
I'm outdated.
regardless, it's $10,000, okay? As long as you're located in a low to moderate income area.
Okay.
And that's
A
why
census tract or-
that's why I'm sending you to the
Okay.
SBA.gov EIDL. You put in your zip code, and it will tell you if you are. That's simple. There's a formula for it.
Okay.
And I guess on May 7th, when I come back,
Oh, yeah.
we'll go
It's on
over
the
it.
agenda.
We'll go over it in detail.
Yeah, okay.
Fantastic. So another question. So EIDL, this is from Sanford, who asked on Facebook, best contact for information and guidance about EIDL. Where do folks go? Because you mentioned some resources that people can go if they need assistance with the EIDL process.
All right. So for EIDL is SBA.gov idle.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please?
Well,
there has been a fire emergency reported in the building.
so I think we're going to
Please evacuate the
take a
building
pause
by the
there.
nearest exit.
We're going to come back to you on May
Emergency
7th,
reported in the building.
and we'll get that information out to folks
By the
so that we can
nearest
adhere to the fire guidance. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. In the meantime, stay safe.